Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Cooperation Tulsa Organizer Education Reading Group. I hope that this has started like I expect it to. Let's double check my audio levels. Last time I messed that up. Yeah, it looks like my mic is correct. I think we're good. Let's check on screen here. I think that should be good now. Yes. Um, it says get rid of one of you. Oh, there's 2 cheeses in the chat. Yeah, we'll get rid I don't know. I don't actually have like a kicking privilege, it doesn't look like. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I can't kick one, but let's see if this is looking good. I'm gonna check on the stream side on the channels. We got content. We're gonna go check. Boom. I think we're going. We are indeed. Yep, looks like it's going. So yeah, thanks everybody for attending both here in the discussion group and in the live stream. This is our second session of the organizer education group being live streamed, that is. It's been going for a while. We're reading Eric McBay's Full Spectrum Resistance. So if you want to follow along with us, in the PDF, we are on page 20 of 477. I think we'll probably just end up starting at the top. But I just want to double check I got everything set up correctly before I continue on. Let's see that. Okay, get rid of this and then um, okay, so this should be showing on stream now. Yes. Why does it always blur out when I do that? It's so weird. And then does it get better then? Yeah. Huh. I have to actually stare at this screen in order for it to not do that. But that's weird because then if I click away to change this, does it blur? No, it doesn't. Okay. Cool. All right. So I think everything's set up and we're ready to go. I'll stay just too small to read. Somebody said I can zoom it. That's about as big as I can zoom it before it starts to become difficult. Does this help? Okay. So does that makes it makes it look better centered? Why does it blur like that? Every time I scroll away from it, it blurs. That's super annoying. Um, oh, there we go. Okay, just had to like load in or something. Very odd. What's it doing? Do you see it on the other side? Is it blurring for y'all? It looks like it's blurring on my screen. So odd. I wonder why it does that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay. Last thing I think I remembered figuring out was that I wanted to put the chat on screen. Let's see. Show comments on stage, I think is how that works. Um, and then I scroll over here and it should show. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, unfortunately, if I scroll over to the stream chat, it goes blurry on screen. That's just such an annoying thing. It didn't do that last time I was messing with it. I wonder why that happens. Yeah, I mean, you can just yeah, exactly. Just kind of tell me if somebody says something's wrong. Okay. Okay. This is why I need to invest in a second monitor, I think. So, all right. I think everything's set up finally. Technical difficulties are out of the way. Everything's streaming. In the chat here, let's get the order of readers. I'll read first, and whoever wants to read second, put two, and three, third, put three, etc. Nice. Okay, so we've got at least three readers, which is, I would say the minimum for us to have a good reading group. All right. So if I scroll over here, does it go blurry? Let's hope not. I assume it's going to be okay. So I'm going to start. What's that? Hmm? Hmm. If so, you can put four or five there in the chat, and then we will have you in that order. Cool. Nice. Okay. Nice. I think we're looking good. Another thing that I just want to remind people of, this is something we forgot to say last time. Anything that you donate to the Anark stream during the live stream, I'm going to just donate straight to Cooperation Tulsa. So all those donations are going to go to Cooperation Tulsa. This is a way for you to help fund the group. But I also just want to say that if you really want to help Cooperation Tulsa succeed and flourish, and for all the projects that we're involved in to get bigger and more prolific, you should go over and become a recurring donor at our open collective. So the link for that should be in the description if I've done everything correctly, but I'm also just going to put it straight into the chat instead of hoping, I suppose. Give me just one moment and I'll get that. Yeah, becoming a recurring donor is like a big part of how we make our money as an organization, and that money gets put straight into everything that we do as an organization. So, that is how we get all of our funding for the farm equipment. That is how we get the funding, for example, to have this StreamYard subscription so that we can do all this fancy stuff that we're doing right now. That all comes from the recurring donations from people who want to see the group succeed. And, at some point, hopefully we can create forms of cooperative economics in order to make our own money. But at the moment, it comes largely from crowdfunding. So understand that your recurring donations make a big difference to the functioning of the group. And with that, now I think we can start. So I'll just start here at the top. The truth, so difficult to accept for those of us raised in the tradition of the liberal left, is that good examples and cogent arguments alone have never stopped exploitation or upset entrenched systems of injustice. They've not done that in the past, and they will not do it now. What we need is to mobilize political force and to confront injustice directly. In other words, to fight. The idea of fighting back makes the liberal left deeply uncomfortable. This is because the liberal left identifies so closely with those in power and sees itself as part of those power structures, the quote unquote loyal opposition. Those who break that loyalty lose the privileges that come with the position. The liberal left is also uncomfortable with fighting back. That's so annoying. I mean, I can't mess with it because I have to look at the document to scroll it. I don't know what the heck to do. I don't know. I mean, I have to look at the document to scroll it, so I yeah, and it wasn't doing that last time. Don't know what that's about. That's a new thing. Maybe I have too many windows open. I'll mess with that here in a second. It's too many probably. Let's start closing some of them off. Get rid of this, get rid of that, get rid of that, close this guy, close that guy. Let's see. Um, 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 um. Yeah, just so everybody knows, the problem is that the way it fixes the blur is when I have to navigate over to the window where the meeting is instead of the window with the PDF in it. So it's very hard to scroll through the PDF and also keep this thing from blurring. I have no idea why that's happening. Very weird stuff. Yeah, it just keeps going back and forth. I'm like watching the stream right now and it just keeps blurring, unblurring, blurring, unblurring. Very annoying. Because it's not like that when I look. Oh, it is like that in the feed. What is happening here? This is very odd. It's not like that in the chat or in the window. Huh. Yeah, that is such an unusual problem it's having. What happens if I full screen, but then I don't full screen? Oh, no, no, I have to do. Can people hear the other people in chat? Have you heard anybody in chat so far? Oh, I have to have this open in order to do that. I have to be on screen and it has to be going. Ah, yes. Okay, there we go. Uh, testing, testing, and Sonia testing. I think I remember what I did last time. It was something like, no, yeah, yeah, exactly. That's what it is. We figured it out. Okay, so that, and I think I have to do more than one of these. Yeah, you should. Okay, they haven't heard anything you've said this whole time. That's wow. Wow. This is incredible. We're doing great things here. Let's go to we're gonna go to share screen, then we're just gonna share um this. Okay, so go back to StreamYard. I'm gonna put this, add it. Then over here, I am just going to be full screen. And then wow, yeah, this is so phenomenal, isn't it? There's great things happening here.
Well, I feel like this time, like after we're done, you should just write down exactly how you had everything.
It really is a
I
huge
just heard
process.
myself.
Oh, yes, okay. I did figure it out. I'm figuring it out. I'm learning. I'm learning. Okay. There we go. Yeah, this whole time other people have been talking. You can hear someone else now. See, we did it. Magic. Magic. Okay. Uh, okay. So, back to reading then. I think we're good, and I don't think it's going to do the stupid blurring thing anymore either. I think we're good on that. So, the liberal left is also uncomfortable with fighting back because it has developed a mythology of social change that bears little resemblance to reality, but I'll come back to that. Like many grassroots activists, I've grown extremely frustrated with the timidity of liberals when it comes to confronting systems of oppression, not only because they should be fighting back, but because in fearfulness they hold others back. A few years ago, I was part of a large grassroots campaign involving prisons and agriculture. It began when the federal government of Canada decided to shut down the 6 prison farms in the country. Those were farms that operated on prisons, where prisoners produced food for their fellow prisoners, got experience, and worked with plants and animals. Everyone we spoke to on the inside told us that the prison farms were valuable for prisoners and that working on the farms, a sought after position, helped them to cope with their circumstances. The prison farm program also paid for itself through the food produced. But the conservative government decided to shut the prison farms down as part of their tough on crime agenda. They wanted to scrap rehabilitation programs, criminalize more people for minor lawbreaking, lengthen sentences, and build larger super jails to accommodate all of the new prisoners this would create. Cramming huge numbers of people into tiny cells without any access to social programs would supposedly increase public safety. It quickly became clear that the conservative plan to shut down the prison farms had nothing to do with them being quote unquote cost effective. Rather, they wanted to get rid of a program that was actually offering some benefit to inmates because they felt that prisoners did not quote unquote deserve to work with plants and animals or to go outside. The prison farms, in other words, did not function as a source of punishment. Farm work was coddling the prisoners. Prisons are big business. The conservative prison plan meant that billions and billions of dollars would be spent on building new prisons, new security technology, and guard wages, along with feeding and clothing additional inmates. This money would go to the corporations that make up the prison industrial complex, corporations that profit from human suffering and the destruction of human communities. Those companies would use their profits to lobby for even more criminalization. Two of Canada's 6 prison farms are at Kingston, Ontario. I see. Two of Canada's 6 prison farms are at Kingston, Ontario, the city nearest to me. One of them is on 800 acres of land in the middle of Kingston. It's been called the largest urban farm in North America. On its 4 sides, it is bordered by a sprawling factory, a commercial strip, a residential area, and a large network of sensitive wetlands. It was apparent that if the farm was closed, the next step would be for the government to take that land and build a super prison or simply sell it for development. Next.
Kingston has a strong local food movement thanks to the Progressive National Farmers Union and awareness of fossil fuel issues and climate change. So, a lot of people understood that this farmland in the middle of the city was invaluable and could even keep people from going hungry in the future. After the planned closure was announced, a group of farmers and social justice activists tried to convince the government to reconsider. They spent a year trying to meet with government officials, organizing letter writing campaigns and petitions. They explained how valuable the prison farms were, both in terms of food security and as a form of rehabilitation, that they wanted to see people released from prison healed and not hardened. The government made no substantive response aside from the occasional insult. Frustrated. Okay, can we scroll a little bit? Thank you. Frustrated at government stonewalling, some of the. Oop, I do not have my physical copy in front of me, and we've lost screen.
I can still see it.
Okay, it's back for me now. Sorry about that. Frustrated at government stonewalling, some of the organizers decided it might be time to escalate to civil disobedience, and so they brought me into the core group. Civil disobedience, like all forms of resistance, is more effective when organized, and we required specific things to undertake civil disobedience. We needed to gather intelligence to identify points of leverage. The main site was a dairy farm with hundreds of cows and only one main access road. If they tried to move out cattle or equipment, we could blockade that road with our bodies. So we needed to be able to watch the farm for signs of that equipment was being moved out. We needed to know who was available to show up and be arrested and when on a 24-hour basis. We needed robust ways of mobilizing hundreds of people in minutes. For a blockade, we would need communications, lawyers, civil disobedience training for the participants, and so on. Okay, I've got a video for Daniel's screen has been turned off to save bandwidth.
I'm still seeing it. I'm not sure if that's on your side.
Maybe, or maybe this is okay. Okay, well, while I can't see it, I guess we should move on to the next person.
Yeah, I can pick up where you left off.
Thank you.
As we began to put that organization in place, we held a big event to mark the shift in the campaign. Author Margaret Atwood, among the most renowned figures on the Canadian left, joined us to speak. My job was to give a speech that would lay out the rationale for civil disobedience, along with a bit of its history, and explain how it fit into the campaign. In the minutes before the event began, several organizers and close supporters came up to me and said things like, make sure make sure you emphasize that it is nonviolent civil disobedience, or to make sure to say peaceful civil disobedience, and so on. If I had taken every bit of last minute advice that was pressed upon me, I would have been speaking on a passive, nonviolent, peaceful, democratic civil disobedience. Some organizers were nervous and wanted to make the shift in strategy seem as polite and non-threatening as possible. The venue, a big old limestone church, was soon completely full. 800 people were seated inside and more waiting outside. This was an enormous turnout for a political rally in a small city. A few others spoke before me, so when it was my turn on the stage, the crowd was already enthusiastic. But as soon as I mentioned the possibility of physically blockading trucks, the entire audience burst into applause. I hadn't yet explained how civil disobedience worked or why it was important. They already got it. Not because they were all familiar with that history, but because they understood that if powerful people are threatening your community, if they are bullying people, if they are ignoring you when their job is to supposedly listen, then, well, more polite requests aren't going to cut it. It wasn't some deep philosophical revelation, it was common sense. This was an important moment in my understanding of the campaign. The crowd's enthusiastic response came in part because they weren't as immersed in a liberal culture as some of the organizers. The willingness of everyone involved in the prison farm struggle to persist and escalate would eventually lead to a win after a 9-year campaign. In stories or movies about resistance, the leaders are always the brave ones, willing to take risks and giving their communities the courage to stand up for themselves and fight back. That, after all, is what makes them leaders. But in real world organizing on the left, I've often seen the opposite. Those in leadership or organizing positions, afraid of alienating their sympathizers, or more importantly to some, their funders, often take the least confrontational position they can. They adopt the politics of the lowest common denominator, which means little danger of conflict and little risk of success. Again and again, I have seen liberal leaders who insisted of demonstrating initiative and bravery. Actually, sorry, the chat is like, it keeps popping up over where I'm reading. Again and again, I have seen liberal leaders who instead of demonstrating initiative and bravery, actually hold back the people they are supposed to be leading. What? You have to be kidding. Remind me tomorrow. People of influence who discourage action and escalation in situations where it is clearly needed. Longtime civil disobedience organizer George Lakey tells the story of how he was invited by a progressive coalition in Washington, D.C. to design a set of nonviolence protests for them. He recounts, "My first question to the group of national leaders was, where is the rebel energy in your coalition?" Silence followed. Finally, they began reciting the story of when various militant groups had left the coalition in disillusionment. In short, there was no rebel energy left. In that case, I said, this will be a short meeting, and he left. Our ideologies are supposed to be liberating and empowering. They are supposed to make us more capable of defending our communities and building new ones. But too often, they do the opposite. People grow encumbered by the ideas instead of empowered. Next.
I didn't put this in the chat because you were reading and I didn't want it to disturb the reading, but we're reading several pages that we read last time. Is that intentional?
No, I just went where my PDF was, and I think what I must have done was scrolled back. So let's see, where were we at the end of last time? Do you recall like what page we ended on?
Did you put it in Discord?
I'm gonna go check right now.
Me too. Yeah, I was just wondering, and then I was like gaslighting myself and being like, no, maybe this was reading from the last time we read this book, but
no, it doesn't look like we put where we ended last time. Let's see. I remember us talking about we fight because you can't influence. We fight because we were fighting for survival. Is that where we ended? If you distilled nectar from your lips and discourse sweet at music. Yeah, this is, I think, where we were. Yeah, I think this is
I
it.
know.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I know we at least got to we fight because industrial capitalism is a dead end, because I remember being devastated about the fish statistic
Okay.
right before that.
Okay, so we read through that section as well.
I know that we read through we fight because we're fighting for survival. I think we might have stopped at the end of that section.
Well, you were saying that the one about industrial capitalism is a dead end, and that comes after. So it may be. So we may.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I know we got to at least the end of the section before that.
So we got to we fight because industrial capitalism is a dead end.
Yes, but I don't think we read past
So
that.
looking on the on the last YouTube live, and it looks like the last thing we got to was we fight because there's nowhere left to run, but I don't know if we
That makes
went
sense.
into it.
Okay, so let's jump to that. Whoever wants to read next can just start at we fight because there's nowhere left to run.
Some people say to me, sure, I agree that the system is terrible and it's destroying the planet, but it's too big to change. Shouldn't we just build alternative communities and try to weather the storm as best we can? I agree that the dominant culture is not going to change. It needs to be disrupted and dismantled. But withdrawal as the sole strategy will fail because there's nowhere left to run to. The dominant culture is global. Its reach and destructiveness are global. It expands ceaselessly to gobble up land, resources, and cultures. Let me be very clear when I say this, I am not dismissing the value of building alternatives. I live on an organic family farm. We grow our own food, we restore habitat and build soil, we build local community. All of these are important and worthwhile. But if we can't stop runaway global warming, among other catastrophes, then all of our work and the land itself will be destroyed. The primary problem with the dominant culture is not that it is sinful or corrupt, but that it is unjust and voracious. We must be more than an alternative, we must be an opposition. Focusing on withdrawal as the primary solution ignores the fact that the planet. Hold on. Focusing on withdrawal as the primary solution ignores the fact the planet was covered with alternative, that is, indigenous cultures for countless millennia. Many or most of these cultures use participatory decision making and placed a high value on equality and justice. The empires and colonizers have spent many centuries trying to exterminate indigenous people and steal their land. Historically, they did this not with high altitude bombers and cruise missiles, but face to face by the sword. Yet not a single empire in history was reformed by encountering the good example of an alternative culture. I've lived on the land and grown my own food for some years and am reasonably good at it. But I am a rank amateur compared to a culture that has lived and learned in the same place for thousands of years. Is it really plausible that my novice example would be more persuasive to those in power than the collective example of hundreds of different cultures? Which brings me to my next point. Next.
We fight because most of us live on stolen land. I live in Canada, a place removed from being rich in resources, and which depends economically on resource extraction, but our resources were acquired through conquest and colonialism. The land has been occupied and taken by force, as in the case of unceded territory or deception. As for land taken but treaties not honored, or both, the land doesn't belong to the settler state or the settlers. It belongs to the, I don't know how to say this. Um, hello?
Algonquin, I think.
Algonquin.
Algo,
Algonquin?
Algonquin, the Algonquin, the Cree, the um, I don't know how to say the last. I don't know how to say. Can someone hop in and say these
It's
names
all
for me?
good. There's
That's
going to be lots of
Ojibwe.
words we
I think someone looked that up for us last time. Ojibwe.
yeah, but also, don't
Ojibwe.
stress too much about it because there's going to be lots of words we can't pronounce in here. Just kind of maybe make your best attempt here.
The Ojibwe, the Haudenosaunee, the Hade, the Dean, the Inuit, to many other indigenous groups, and to the non-humans who have lived here for thousands of years. At what point does an occupation based on genocide become legitimate? Imagine that the Nazis had succeeded in conquering the Nazis had succeeded in conquering the entire planet, that they had driven out or exterminated everyone they considered undesirable. Imagine that they had ushered in a global Third Reich. When would that occupation become legitimate? When would it become acceptable? I would answer never. The good Germans might forget the crimes their society was based on. Some of their descendants might, one day, become critical of those crimes, but that would not reverse the atrocities that had taken place. That would not change the fact that their society's foundation, its template, was conquest and occupation. Colonialism is not inconvenient afterthought. It in an otherwise good culture. It is not a misunderstanding that comes from failing to value the arts and culture of indigenous peoples. It is the original sin of civilization. It is the sine non of modern technological society. Industrial capitalism in the Americas, indeed the entire world, exists only because indigenous cultures were attacked and dispossessed of their land. Without there would be no resources based for industrial society. Do I keep going or stop?
We've been reading like 2 pages, but you can trade off whenever you like.
It's vibes
Oh,
based. If you feel like you've read enough, like you can always pass it on or whatever.
how do you reform a system which is based on wholesale genocide and theft of the entire continents from their rightful inhabitants? You don't. Colonialism is not part of a bygone age. It is not something that we can all forget about because it happened a long time ago. It continues. You only need to read the news to see that attacks against indigenous people continue daily in North America and around the world. Expansionist civilizations may have conquered most of the planet and they have exploited most of the resources, but they have always been hungry for more. The dominant culture is based on overconsumption and the myth of infinite growth. It must expand because it destroys its own land base, which means it must take over land bases of others. It has done this for thousands of years, and it will continue to do this until it is stopped, until we say stop and mean it, and are willing to put ourselves and our lives in the way. Okay, I'm done.
I think it's me next. Okay. We fight because the institutions of democracy have failed. Almost everyone recognizes that corporations have more power than people do. For a country to be quote unquote democratic means that it is run by the people, that people are the dominant force in that society. Since corporations are the dominant force in most countries, since laws are made to suit them and court decisions to benefit them, most countries are not, by definition, democratic. Whether a country has a representative electoral system is secondary. If government is not accountable to the people, it is not democratic. If we recognize this, then the main if we recognize this, then the main debate is only about when and how that corporate power became overwhelming and what to do about it. It's tempting to believe that the corporate coup is a recent occurrence and that many of our problems could be solved by rewinding a few decades. But is that so? I'm going to give you 3 different quotes about corporate power from different years. You tell me which ones are old and which are recent. Number 1. The time has come to face the fact that the forces of capital and industry have outgrown the forces of government. Number 2. The result of American industrial development is what might have been expected, an overwhelming organization of industry standing side by side with a state that is puny when compared to it. Number 3. In the last 30 years, we have watched the balance of power shift from the hands of the public to those of an industro-financial hierarchy, specialists in money making and actuated by a rather unreflecting instinct of acquisition. To change this control, to reallocate power, is the problem of the people of the United States. Okay, it was a trick question. None of those quotations are recent. They were written in 1900, 1904, and 1923, respectively. Well over a century ago, it was widely recognized that corporate power had outstripped the power of the quote unquote democratic state. For one more, consider the words of Republican organizer Mark Hanna in 1895. There are 2 things that are important in politics. The first is money, and I can't remember what the second one is. We can look back even further. Corporations themselves predate the modern democratic state. They were created by aristocratic European powers as engines of colonialism to extract resources from the colonies and to transform free and fertile continents into vast mines and plantations. In South Asia in the 18th century, the East India Tea Company forced farmers to grow export crops like tea and indigo instead of subsistence crops like rice. The subsequent famines killed well over 10 million people. At one time, the Hudson's Bay Company was the de facto ruler of most of Canada. Many of us were raised to see democratic governments as our protectors against corporations. It would be more accurate to say that those governments are the product of colonial corporations and of the social and economic relationships they forged. Yes, corporate rule has worsened in recent decades, but it's been pretty bad for a long time. Despite the fact that so many people understand we don't live in a genuine democracy, many people insist on pretending that we do. This is an enormous strategic mistake. This pretense may comfort people by making them feel like they have leverage, but in reality, the effect is the opposite. Deliberate self delusion deprives us of the tactics we would need to get actual democracy and to effect actual change in society. Not only have the institutions of state democracy failed, but they were never truly ours in the first place. The supposed founder of American democracy, George Washington, was one of the richest men in America at the time of independence. A slave owner unhappy that British taxes were cutting into his profits. Even the original quote unquote birthplace of democracy, Athens, was a city where only elite male citizens could vote, and where citizens were far outnumbered by the subjugated slaves who supported them. Indeed, Athens actually had a higher proportion of enslaved people than other non democratic Greek cities. Democracy is not something handed down from on high or from mythical ages past. It is something that a people win for themselves. Next.
We fight because it's right. Whenever abuses and atrocities are committed by those in power, defiance is a moral imperative. Remember the Milgram experiments of the 1960s? Psychologist Stanley Milgram and his colleagues wanted to see if regular people, instructed by a person in authority, would give a fatal electric shock to a stranger. In their initial experiments, almost every participant complied and turned the simulated electrical current up to a lethal level. But in a second experiment, they added another variable, an actor who would sit alongside the participant during the experience. That actor's job was to refuse to proceed with the experiment when when the electric shocks became dangerous. When the actor refused, almost all of the participants followed their example and stopped the experiment. Resistance spreads. The Occupy movement, Idle No More, Black Lives Matter. One person's defiance can inspire another. One person's resistance can allow many other people to stand firm. Victory should always be the goal, but even when there is no clear path to success, resistance is still right. You can't win unless you try, and acts of defiance can keep the embers of resistance alive, even when the fire is at its lowest ebb. We fight because we are part of a tradition. Wherever there has been oppression and occupation, there has been resistance. From the Visigoths to the abolitionists, from the Momo to the Dakota war parties, from the civil rights sit-ins to the desperate uprisings in Nazi concentration camps, some people always fight back. Any basic rights we possess, the right to vote, to sit at whichever lunch counter we please, to speak dissent openly, the right not to be owned by someone else, have been won by earnest struggle. They exist because people have defied authority and organized against oppression. People have fought, have been tortured, and have been imprisoned and have been killed. They have lost decades of their lives in prison. They have lost limbs, they have lost their families, they have lost everything and kept on fighting. There is a fashionable belief in some circles that fighting back does not work, that social change comes from the goodwill of those in power and from historical inevitability. As I will argue in the chapters to come, this is a gross distortion of historical reality. It is an affront to the memory of those who have sacrificed to win us the freedoms we have, and it is, above all, a delusion that must be jettisoned before it dooms our social justice struggles and our planet. Think of all those who have laid down their lives in the struggle against empire and mass exploitation. Think of Ken Saro-Wiwa, murdered by Nigeria and Shell because he stood up for the people of the Niger Delta. Think of Sophie Scholl, hanged by the Nazis for her role in the White Rose Society. In the moment before her execution, she said, "Such a fine, sunny day, and I have to go. But what does my death matter if through us thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action?" It seems wrong to speak of courageous people like Scholl and Saro-Wiwa on the same page as those who claim that it is impossible to fight back. Countless people, both famed and anonymous, have given their lives to fight for a better future. We owe them something in return, honesty at the very least. We must fight even when we don't think we can win. If we back down, then we teach those in power that they can walk all over us, and we give younger people a terrible example. When we resist, even if we lose that particular battle, we show that we will fight so that next time those in power may pause and reconsider, so that our allies will remember that they are part of a history of resistance. We must fight because no victory against oppression is ever final. There will always be reactionaries and conservatives who want to roll back the progress we've made, to recover the power and privilege of their past, or to make America great again. We've seen that with Trump and the alt-right, with the police shootings of unarmed people of color that still occur on a weekly or daily basis decades after the civil rights movement. But conversely, we must also remember that every victory, even a partial victory, will give us something to build on, will get us closer to a world of true equality and genuine justice. Resistance is a tradition that extends deep into the past, and it will continue far into the future, presuming we can keep the planet intact enough to support future generations. We take a risk when we act, but we gain something for generations to come. Next.
We fight because most people won't. Most of the globally wealthy are too privileged, too indoctrinated, too short-sighted, too distracted by the 24-hour media spectacle to fight back. And most of the globally poor are preoccupied with daily survival and other primary emergencies. That said, the dispossessed are still fighting a hell of a lot harder than the privileged. Education alone is never going to be enough. Education often becomes an impediment to things we should just be doing, argues Indigenous resistor Sean Brandt of Tyendinaga. We could spend decades saying the same thing over and over, but if we wait until we convince everyone, we will be waiting forever. Not everyone is going to like us. The left believes in education and truth. These are wonderful things, but the belief that truth will inevitably win out over falsehood and that history is a one-way roller coaster of human progress is a dangerous mythology. Look at Donald Trump or the growing popularity of authoritarian leaders in many countries. It is tempting to believe that if the global system truly gets bad enough, then people will finally take action. Public opinion surveys on global warming offer a refutation of such ideas. In theory, public education about the dangers of greenhouse gases should lead to ever-growing support for solutions. At the very least, more people would acknowledge the existence of global warming. But a large percentage of people in the countries with the greatest carbon emissions, such as the United States, are still desperate to ignore climate change. A 2016 study by the Pew Research Center found that 52% of adults in the United States do not believe humans are causing climate change. They also found that between 2009 and 2014, the number of Americans who believed climate change is not happening at all actually increased from 11% to 25%. While people in general are becoming more aware of climate change over time, those on the right continue to deny. Polls found that after Trump's election, Republican voters were more likely to deny that climate change was happening at all. This increase in denial is partly the result of persistent propaganda campaigns funded by industry groups. And even as public opinion has shifted in some places to ignore climate change, greenhouse emissions have reached terrible new heights. And almost every year on Earth breaks new temperature record. But this public apathy is also driven by a lack of serious action. Psychological research shows that when people do not make an appropriate response to an emergency, bystanders mentally downgrade the seriousness of the situation. The idea that action will finally happen when things get bad enough was even present in Germany as Nazi influence grew. Many communists believed that once Hitler gained power, he would finally be revealed for the monster he was. Then the working class would rise up and fight. The slogan of the German Communist Party in the early 1930s was, after Hitler comes us. Using this slogan, the Communist Party refused to enter into a coalition with Jesus Christ, I did not know this. Refused to enter into a coalition with the Social Democrats to stop the rise of Hitler, believing that a backlash against the Nazis would thrust them into power. As German history sadly proved, the worse is better theory drastically underestimated the power of political repression to destroy movements. Indeed, even after the Nuremberg trials and the exposure of the concentration camps, only 20% of Germans said that it would have been acceptable to resist Hitler during World War II. Often, resistance must happen before a change in mass consciousness and not the other way around. Some leftists believe that George W. Bush's election would be good news, and that if elected, his transparent warmongering and corporate favoritism would galvanize public opposition and push the political spectrum to the left. But the opposite happened. The left was cowed into submission after 9/11, and Bush's popularity skyrocketed to ensure his election to a second term. And a second term for Trump surely won't be good. No, it's not. I wish I could believe that there will be some grand operatic uprising in the 11th hour, but neither history nor current events offer support for this. This is not an easy reality to accept, but it is one that we must acknowledge and act within. Ollie, are you still with us? I think
Yeah,
you're not.
sorry. I didn't hear you say next. My bad.
Sorry.
We fight because we want a real future, explaining why they fought so hard. Civil rights activists Unita, is that right? Unita Blackwell said, I guess our courage came out because we didn't have nothing and we couldn't lose nothing, but we wanted something for ourselves and for our children, and so we took a chance with our lives. We've been told that if we buy compact fluorescents and fair trade coffee, if we vote for the right people and sign the right petitions, if we just stay positive, then not only can we avert ecological disaster, but that progress will usher in a happy green middle class future. But this is simply wrong. Fair trade coffee and the like may be better than the alternative, but it's a tiny change in a system that is overwhelmingly headed in the wrong direction. Many of us know in our bones that this technotopia is not going to come about, but we don't know what else to do. The alternative is terrifying. The truth is that mainstream environmental and social justice organizations have deeply misled people about what kind of change and what scale of change is necessary to create a livable future. They've not done this because they are bad people, but because the really large nonprofits have become corporations like any other. They have to sell a product to make money, and so they sell guilt relief and false hope. The future they conjure cannot exist. You do not get to a happy green future by destroying the soil, air, and water. The truth is that in the long term, we have very little to lose. The people who understand that have nothing. The people who understand that they have nothing to lose, like Unita Blackwell, are those who fight the hardest. The Technotopia future, no matter how well meaning, is a false diversion that makes us feel like we have something to lose when we don't. We will only win when we reclaim our own future from the corporations, both in the physical world and in our collective visions. We fight because we're all in this together. Those in power function by divide and rule, by pitting the environmentalists against the working class, indigenous people against farmers, poor people against immigrant refugees. This strategy has been terribly effective. But power has become increasingly concentrated in the hands of a small number of people ruling through a system of patriarchy, racism, ecocide, and violence. Single issue struggles no longer exist in any meaningful way. No movement can be isolated from others and still have any hope of victory. Only an intersectional approach that combines an understanding of sexism, racism, classism, and other oppressions will bring success. If there is any benefit to the consolidation of power, it is that this fact is increasingly obvious. We must either defeat the system of industrial capitalism with its imperial and colonial methods, or be obliterated by it. Either we bring down the dominant culture and make strides forward in all of our struggles, or we allow this culture to devour what's left of our planet, and all of our struggles will be defeated. We win or lose together. Next.
We fight because holding back won't make us safer. Fighting back is scary, and it can be dangerous. So any excuse that allows us to take the temporarily safer route to hold back can be tempting. In any strategy, there is a time to hold and a time to push forward. But in the big picture, in the long term, when things get really bad, fighting back can make people more safe, not less safe. During World War II, there was a secret dissident group in Germany called the Crusade Circle. About 20 anti-Nazi dissidents from various backgrounds met hundreds of times during the war to discuss what to do. Their major topic of conversation was to do after the war. That is, how to organize from the future of Germany in a way that would prevent someone like Hitler from seizing power again. They drew up plans from a decentralized society based on small distributed agrarian communities. These autonomous rural villages would be much harder to entrap in centralized authoritarianism. I'm sure that their basic blueprint would be appealing to many back-to-landers or transition town enthusiasts. The problem was that they spent too much time thinking about how to prevent a future war while Germany was in an actual war, and the Nazi Holocaust raged on around them. Yes, they were brave and took courage to engage in any dissident political thought in Nazi Germany, but in hindsight, this was probably not the highest priority. The Crusade Circle chose a goal that was relatively safe, marking a future German society, remaking a future German society, but also one that would have no leverage over. A few associates of the circle became discontented with the lack of action and carried out a failed assassination attempt against Hitler on July 20th, 1944. These failed assassins were hanged, along with many members of the Crusade Circle and other dissident groups. When things get really bad, holding back doesn't help. I asked Dakota activists and the writer Wazatawan about collaboration and resistance among indigenous peoples. I think there are a couple of important lessons I draw from indigenous resistance struggles here. She told me the first was it mattered little whether people resisted, fled, or acquired the colonized society, or acquiescence to colonizer society, because in the end, we all suffered pretty much the same fate. Thus, it is some of our people are engaging in the acts of resistance today. We will not save ourselves by betraying that resistance. It is in our best interest to fight. Second, if our ancestors could have seen what would become of our homeland and people, I think that they would have fought harder. Today, we have every reason to believe that society will continue on this pathway of destruction, a notion our ancestors would have had a difficult time imagining, given its suicidal nature. So it makes sense for us to fight harder. We risk everything we do not to engage in struggle now, and unlike our ancestors who are fighting against the rise of the American empire, we are fighting amidst its decline. So there is little to be gained from holding back. Those who fight back often gain enough. But hold on. There Though there is little to be gained from holding back, those who gain, at the very least, some self-respected, those who fought back in the Warsaw Ghetto or the Sholobor concentration camp, had a higher survival rate than those who didn't. In the modern day in Canada, suicide rates in some Indigenous communities are as high as 800 times the national average, while others have little or no suicide. The difference? A 2003 study showed that Indigenous communities who undertake militant or organized resistance have the lowest suicide rates. Fighting back can save lives in more ways than one. It is possible to be too nice to those in power. I've written elsewhere about how John Brown, in the course of trying to seize an armory and start a guerrilla war against slavery, paused to allow the defeated defenders of the armory a chance to order out for breakfast and make escorted visits to their family. While he was doing this, instead of staying mobile in the way a guerrilla must, an army unit marched over and captured his band. Brown and the others were hanged. The consequences of John Brown being too nice, or perhaps as a friend of mine suggested, trying to determine compassion and empathy to slave owners was or demonstrate compassion and empathy to slave owners was exactly the prolonged and bloody civil war that John Brown had been trying to head off. Nice actions don't always have nice consequences. Understand that those in power have a different psychology than those who resist. Sociopaths, from dictators to conmen, look at niceness or a desire to compromise and see vulnerability. They see an opportunity of exploitation. They see weakness. Holding back won't truly make us safer, but fighting back can. Of course, those in power will try to repress those who fight back, often violently, and of course, they will attack those who are effective, and even those who are ineffective. That's exactly why we have to stop them. Next.
It's actually like 8:35 now.
Yup.
Should we
It's my
keep reading or
turn.
go to the discussion?
What's that?
I said, should we keep reading or go to discussion?
Oh, no, it's time to move to discussion. So it's my turn, and that's a perfect time for the transition. So that's the end of the reading portion of the group. Now we're going to move into the discussion period. So, as usual, I just want to open the floor. Did anybody have any particular parts of the reading this evening that stuck out to them?
Absolutely. The part that really just keeps ringing in my head is when he's saying that we have to fight even when we think that we won't win. Like, even if you think you can't win that fight, like, you have to fight it anyway, because it does make them realize that we're not going to be so easily pushed around. And I can think of several instances in my own history where that was absolutely true, where it just makes the authorities realize that they're going to have to very carefully choose their battles, because they might win, but at what cost? Like, what is it going to cost them? And for a lot of these things, like, we went into it knowing that, we weren't going to like win, but that it was going to make them have to think twice. And I can think of one perfect example of this where I was not there, but thinking of the Elm Fork John Brown Gun Club in Dallas, defending a homeless, houseless encampment, like a tent camp. And when they tried to sweep the camp, Elm Fork John Brown Gun Club came in and basically like held off the city authorities long enough to let everybody at least like pack up their things and make a plan for like where else to go. And the way that the city officials interacted with the houseless encampments in the future was drastically different than the way that they had done it before the people stood up and put their foot down. So yeah, that part.
I think that it's really inspiring to like have small acts of civil disobedience, for other people, and like we can't just focus on like mutual aid or just civil disobedience. We have to have like a mixture of both so that we can show people that we're here to defend them, but we also have alternatives to our current society. And small acts of civil disobedience, even like the smallest thing, can lead to bigger domino effects, and it can show, other people. And I think that's something that I got out of it, and I really enjoyed.
I think anarchist calisthenics is a concept that I think you might enjoy reading more into. There's a lot of YouTube videos about it where it's basically like small acts of resistance, kind of gearing you up for and making you more brave for bigger acts of resistance, like you were describing. But that's the term that they use, anarchist calisthenics.
Yeah, no, I think there was a lot of valuable stuff in the part that we read this evening. It reminds me, I was just watching an Instagram reel earlier. It was ICE agents going onto a farm, and they were trying to pressure this farmer essentially to start turning over their workers. And the guy was like, you're in the wrong place right now. This is cowboy country. You come around here and you try to tell me what to do, and we're gonna have to tussle, my friend. And and you hear the
I
ICE
saw
agents being,
that, and he was just a big old good old boy.
yeah, he was a big old black guy with a cowboy hat on and cowboy boots, and you hear the ICE agents being like, well, we don't want to tussle, and they kind of stop in their tracks once he says that. I think that people really underestimate the degree to which people in power assume you're just going to bow down when they come in with force. And when you tell them, hey, you're going to encounter force if you do that, they reconsider, they change their angle. They don't want to get hurt any more than anybody else.
That's the entire conservative approach, is to just try anything and everything and like demand like the absolute biggest thing and just see how much they fight back. Because most of the time, if they is liberal Democrats, they're not going to fight back. they're going to say like, oh well, what if we just give you guys a little bit of ethnic cleansing as a treat, but then encountering radical leftists who are, Second Amendment fans, they really think twice.
Anybody else have any thoughts about what we read this evening?
I like that they brought up, I think we talked about it a little bit last time, the psychology of like bystander theory or whatever it was. It's like the the bits of anarchist calisthenics and all of that those are setting examples and like showing people that like, hey, another thing is possible, like so I think that I don't know, it was just really I like that they tied that in with the whole thing. Um, and I'm missing half of that thought. It's half baked, but I'll come back to it later if I can.
I think that what they were talking about with like Nazi Germany and how people, wanted to create a society after the fact instead of during, could be very important to like the current leftist political thought, in which there's ideas that everything is just going to pass over and people will naturally rise up. But like unless people actually do something about it, like us individuals, nothing can really happen. Well, yeah, I think it takes people doing like anarchist calisthenics and these small acts of civil disobedience, and it helps with like the bystander effect, because a lot of the time people just go with the flow or whatever that means, like to stay within the current like hierarchical realism. But when you show them an alternative through civil disobedience and like different systems like mutual aid, and showing that you can be kind, but you can also protect people from the unkind, like they were saying with John Brown, um, and where his mistake was in the fact that you give compassion to certain people that you don't necessarily like need to give compassion to at the moment, because they're brainwashed or any plethora of things. And sometimes it's important to do both. You have to be kind, but you also have to make sure that you have like a lot of like self-defense. Like you don't need to be preemptively violent to people, but you have to make sure that you have everything in place, and you realize that slave owners in a way are sociopaths, and certain people ingrained in systems of hierarchy, they become less empathetic. And I think yeah.
I'll say for my own sake, one thing I really liked um, was him making the point about the illegitimacy of colonization. And I think his argument that he used was an extremely persuasive argument. He was like, imagine that like Nazi Germany had conquered the planet and destroyed all of these societies that existed beforehand and claimed that they owned all those places. you know how long would it take for you to say that that was now legitimate? I think he's basically like, then intimates like, I think if you're like me, there wouldn't be a period of time where you would say, okay, now it's legitimate, right? Like there's no, it doesn't, the period of time is kind of a distraction. It's not legitimate period because of the way that it was gained. I thought that was extremely valuable. That was a good way of looking at it. Also, in that same part, I thought it was valuable that he said, like, he kind of that like segged into an argument about how uh you know just creating alternatives, hoping that the alternatives are going to change their minds. If that was going to work, it would have worked a long time ago. Because once again, when they first came here, there were already, thousands, tens of thousands of distinct indigenous societies that were working great. and they clearly demonstrated an alternative, and it didn't work. There was more of them then than now, and it made no difference. They bowled them over completely nonetheless. So no demonstration of an alternative to the enemy powers is going to get them to practice kindness and goodness and be like, well, you know what, you're right, you plucky kids, you really showed us that our power structure wasn't the right way of doing things. We're going to give you power after all. I think those were all like very persuasive arguments he made in that section.
Well, I mean, it's conservatives, fascists, everybody on the right wing, they pretty much only respond to like a show of force, and they're not about negotiation. It's all about force. Their whole mentality of like alpha shit. It's all about like, this isn't a negotiation. I'm just going to like take it by force. And so the only thing that can counter that is more force, fire with fire. But also, one thing that really stuck out to me, there was a mention of a study, which I'm going to go find after this, a study from 2003 with Canadian Indigenous communities, and it was talking about suicidality rates, and that overall it's like 800 times that of the standard non-Indigenous communities, but they had noted that communities that had a strong resistance movement had a significantly reduced suicidality. And that is something that I try to tell people all the time. I didn't know about this study, but I'm definitely putting it in the toolkit. But like, if you are feeling hopeless, if you are feeling distressed about the state of things, getting involved, even if you don't think you're going to win, getting involved in doing something with a community, doing activism, organizing, even like mutual aid or direct aid, that will relieve so much of that hopelessness. Being surrounded by helpers will, you come to know that like, not only am I doing things, I'm surrounded by people who are also doing things, and it's not hopeless. And I think like the absolute worst thing that people can do for their own psyche is to do nothing, to stay at home, be isolated, be online at all times, and never out in your community, because it really keeps my doomerism in check. Absolutely. Is everybody being quiet, or is it frozen? Oh shit.
Being quiet.
Okay.
No, it's, I was just taking a phone call real quick. If anybody else has any other thoughts, we have what, about 10 more minutes?
Well, random side tangent, I guess. I also was watching Reels today, and there was I didn't save it, but it just seemed like such a, like, yeah, duh kind of thing for me, where she was basically talking about this bike shed concept of building a bike shed where suddenly you have like a lot of people involved in the deliberation of it and the planning of it, and somebody chimes in and says, well, we should buy local reclaimed wood, and okay, well, let's start looking for that. And somebody else says, well, it should be reclaimed wood that's owned by a person of color. And okay, well, we'll find that. And then, well, we should also make sure that it's like a worker cooperative. And so, okay, and then they start, looking into all that. And meanwhile, like, now they have a pile of reclaimed wood that they've bought from the very perfect place, and they've talked about all the planning of it, but they never actually built the damn bike shed. And I see that happening so often in like organizing communities, where it's like people just want to plan things and like not actually like just start doing it. And something I've learned in 15 years of organizing is that like people don't get on board with the planning. They get on board once they see that it's happening. Like if you're actively hammering the posts up, then people will join you. But nobody really gets on board with, I think maybe that's because everybody talks shit about what they're going to do. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, one of these days I'm going to whatever. But a lot of times people just don't do it. And so what I have found is that if you just fucking start doing the thing, even if you're not doing it perfectly, that is the only time when people really get on board.
100% agreed. Yeah, no, and I've had friends before who will like reach out to me because they're distressed about the politics of the moment, right? And I always have to tell them, I'm like, you're going to feel better once you start to act, once you do something, really almost anything, just start to act towards solving these issues. And you will begin to feel that feeling, that doomer feeling. It won't maybe go away, right? But it will be less pervasive. When you are doing nothing, then that doomer feeling is going to consume your mind. And I think that's true for pretty much any struggle, any political struggle.
And from there, one of the things that I really like that you brought up, Theo, was the understanding that we're not going to win. I feel like there's almost like a zen in that, of understanding that like, no, we are not going to win, but we are still going to do these small things. I think maybe that kind of like societal conditioning of being afraid of failing is kind of keeping people from being able to. Sorry, I've got dogs jumping all over me, so I'm distracted. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's important. It's in my mind, it's not an acceptance that we won't win. It's an understanding that we don't know. Like, you have to act regardless, right? Like, if we are going to succeed, that success will be the result of all of the discrete acts that we did to succeed. But if we presume we're going to fail, I think in a general sense, people are probably a lot less likely to act. But we have to accept that it's like we can't really know what the outcome necessarily is going to be. We have to just act, recognizing that it's necessary. I think that it's really important that people act out of a sense of necessity. It kind of comes back to like that thing he said about how if people see that others are not reacting appropriately to an emergency, they downgrade their perception of the risk of the emergency, right? Like if a whole house is burning down, but everybody's just kind of standing around like, all right. I guess, in their mind, they're like, well, the house must not be that important, or, oh, okay, they got all their stuff out, or they just make kind of assumptions about why, oh, people just don't seem to think it's very urgent. So I guess it must not be. Um, and I think that's a big part of it. That's that you have to struggle, and you have to do so urgently, and you have to act with like this dire urgency, this dire sense of necessity, so that others recognize that that's how they should be acting too. Like there's so many elements of why that we struggle without any expectation of success, because we don't know if there will be success. We just know it has to be done for us to succeed, right? Like if the house is half on fire, we still need to put it out so we can salvage the other half, even if we can't save the whole house, you know?
Yeah, I think, I've talked a lot in the past about how people pretty much only respond to urgency. Like they need to see you being demonstrative about the urgency of the thing for them to believe it. And like this comes into play everywhere. This comes into play with my doctors. When I go to the doctor, I have to be demonstrative about it, or if I'm too calm, they won't believe me. But as something that I have said over and over is that people are really good at acute empathy and bad at chronic compassion, because like the acute empathy is really urgent. It's something really urgent. The building's on fire and there are kittens inside, and if you're visibly panicking, people are more likely to act because they see, oh, this is a really urgent situation. But the chronic compassion, where it's less urgent feeling, then people tend to drop out. And so sometimes you kind of have to make it dramatic and make it urgent, because that's the only way. I don't know why that is about like people's psychology, but that's how people's brains kind of respond.
I just want to note we only have about 2 minutes left. So Sunny was saying, I feel they said, I don't understand the rules. Is the chat the speakers or the audience engagement? Well, the audience engagement is something we kind of want to implement a little bit, but this is, the focus is supposed to be on the people who are actually like in the reading group. We're doing this as a recording so that y'all can, have a count of the reading group, and also hear us read the work, so that you can have sort of an audiobook for yourself. If you would like to join the reading group discussion, then we would want to have you be in the Cooperation Tulsa server, and to join using the Jitsi link, and to be on audio and all that.
Become a recurring donor.
Yeah, become a recurring
Just
donor, and we will
like
absolutely
$2 a
give you that.
month. You could be just the same way as your private Patreon. If people become like a recurring donor, even at like $2 a month or whatever, which we desperately need every single dollar we can get, then like, yeah, then you can join these Jitsi calls instead of just being a listener from the outside.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's pretty much the dynamic we're kind of proceeding forward with. Just understand that Cooperation Tulsa is definitely in a period right now where we're trying to fundraise. We definitely need people to become recurring donors. So if you become a recurring donor, that is the easiest way to get an invite to the Cooperation Tulsa Discord server, and then every Monday you'll get links to our reading groups. So, no, if you just want access, just go become a recurring donor for any amount, like even $1 a month would be enough. And, again, I will give everybody the link there in chat. Give me just a moment. But yeah, that's, pretty much it. It is 9:01. And so, no, nothing to apologize for. That we are clarifying and trying to work out how all of this works. Like I've got the Anark live streams really dialed in, but the Cooperation Tulsa live streams, we're still trying to figure out how all this works.
Don't forget to write all that down before you move on to whatever else you're doing.
I took a picture of the screen. I think that's going to help me next time. So hopefully next time when we get started, that's going to go a lot faster. Ollie, I see you've raised your hand. Is there something you wanted to say before we closed it out?
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick that I am going to try before the next reading to put together a list of the indigenous groups and tribes that have been mentioned in the book. And I might even skim the next 20 pages or so and try and just write down the pronunciation of them and cross-reference tribal resources to make sure I have the pronunciation right. That way we have something to reference, because it seems like all of us are kind of getting hung up on some words. And obviously there's going to be words that people don't know, but we live in Oklahoma, so I feel like we should know a lot of these words or how to pronounce them.
Yeah, I think having like a phonetic guide that breaks it down into each syllable would be helpful, with like the phonetic spelling, maybe.
Yeah, I
think
looked
that'd be
online and I just couldn't find one, so I will put one together. Just someone please, if I haven't done it by the next meeting, just remind me. Got a lot going on.
Thank you for volunteering to do so. Hopefully I'll remember and I can poke you before the next one. Cool. So, yeah, I appreciate everybody showing up, both the people here in the reading group, but also everybody who showed up to the live stream. These are going really well, even if I'm still struggling a little bit with the technology and like how all of this works. I think we're getting it figured out. This one went better than the last one. The first 30 minutes were not me with my mic not on. So I think we did well by comparison. Yeah, thanks everybody for showing up. And I think that is it for this one. I'll see y'all next time.
Good night, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.
Bye.